I will be presenting today on behalf of Dr. David Brent, and later on I will be presenting also some initial results on the genetics from the study. First, I would like to start by thanking the funding agencies. Without their support, the study wouldn't have been possible, and these include grants from the National Institute of Mental Health, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, the Klingenstein Third Generation Foundation, NARSAD, the Binational Science Foundation, and the Karolinska Institute. There are no conflicts of interest or disclosures of any of the key study personnel to present. And the key personnel for the study are in alphabetical order. From Israel, Muhammad Al-Haib, Dr. Apter, Ilana Farbstein, Amos First, Sami Hamdan, Avi Weitzman. And from Pittsburgh, David Brent, Bernie Devlin, Robert Farrell, myself, and Jamie Zelazny. Thank you. Although suicide is a rare event, it has a very important and highly significant impact on public health. Suicide in the United States is the third leading cause of death in young individuals, and it is really the single biggest risk factor for suicide completion is suicidal behavior, which includes ideation and attempts. There are high rates. The rates of suicidal behavior they range between 1.7 to 5.9%, and they have been increasing in many countries as well as in Israel. However, till now, our understanding of the etiology of suicidal behavior is limited, and there are no empirically based treatments yet. Why should we focus on the genetics of suicidal behavior? Studies, adoption, twin, and family studies have all supported and suggested a role of genetics in the etiology of suicidal behavior. In an early study in 1979, an adoption study, there was a six-fold increase in suicide was observed in the biological relatives of index cases of adult adoptees as compared to the adoptive relatives. And later in 86, Wender et al. Have shown a 15-fold increase in the suicidal behavior in the biological relatives as compared to the adoptive relatives. Also, twin studies have shown a concordance that is greater in the monozygotic twins as compared to the dizygotic twins. And the estimates of heritability for suicidal behavior has been as high as 55%. Family studies also have suggested, including our studies and studies by Dr. David Brent, we have shown that there is a familial aggregation of suicidal behavior, and that the familial transmission of this phenotype is independent of the transmission of other psychiatric disorders, and that it is mediated through the transmission of impulsive aggression. Also, recent candidate gene studies have found some associations between suicidal behavior and candidate genes in the serotonergic system. So all of these they provide some evidence that there is a genetic etiology. In part, there is a genetic etiology for suicidal behavior. As I mentioned, that our study on the familial pathways of suicidal behavior, Dr. David Brent is the PI of the study. We have shown that there is a familial aggregation of suicidal behavior, where we compared three groups of the offspring of three proband groups. The first group I don't know how this is work. Okay. The first group, which is in black, really these are the probands who have made a suicide attempt, and they have had a sibling who have attempted suicide. The second group in red, the line in red, these are the offspring of probans who have attempted suicide but did not have a sibling who have attempted suicide. And the last group is And the last group is a group of probans who never attempted suicide and they never had any siblings with suicidal behavior. And as we can see, the offspring of the concordant attempters are at higher risk of suicidal behavior as compared to the other two groups. There are some difficulties with genetic studies of suicide, and this is particularly due to the nature of and the complexity of the phenotype itself, as well as a major problem has been the heterogeneity of the populations that have been studied, where they include several individuals from different ancestries all compiled in one group. And thus, to be really the ideal population for a genetic study of complex behaviors is to have a homogeneous population that are really, the more homogeneous they are, the better it is for genetic studies. And that leads to our study in this Bedouin family, where during her clinical work, Dr. Farbstein has found and made the observation that many people who are admitted to the emergency rooms with suicide attempts, they have the same last name. And that led to the Arab Bedouin family, where there are 8 extended families, 5 of which are related and they are stemming from or descending from the same founder, and 3 are unrelated. And in a previous pilot study funded by the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, we have found that the rates of suicide are higher in the related families as compared to the non-related families. And that basically that was the beginning of this study. And in addition to the higher rates of suicidal behavior, there are high rates of consanguinity and high rates of endogamy in this family. So the goals of the study are to construct the pedigrees of the family, or it's better to refer to it of the kindred, as it is really larger than one family, and conduct psychiatric assessment with all individuals who were 15 years of age and older, and obtain blood for DNA and to conduct a genome-wide scan, and finally to conduct linkage analysis to look at the relationship between genes and suicidal behavior, mood and anxiety disorders, as well as two potential endophenotypes or intermediate phenotype of these disorders, which are impulsive aggression and neuroticism. The assessments that have been conducted include the World Mental Health Composite International Diagnostic Interview. We have obtained the Arabic version of the CD from Lebanon, from courtesy of the Institute for Development Research, Advocacy and Applied Care in Lebanon. And also, we have obtained the Arabic versions of the Beck Depression Inventory and the Beck Anxiety Inventory, and these are self-reports. In addition, we have translated, and I have translated myself, the aggression questionnaires, which are the Brown-Goodwin Aggression Inventory and the Aggression Questionnaire, as well as the Barrett Impulsivity Scale. And in abuse, we have assessed childhood experiences of physical and sexual abuse in this kindred, and these were translated and pilot tested in the study population before the beginning of the interviews. The interview training, I have received the training of trainers in Lebanon of the Arabic version of the World Mental Health CD, and that training was also transmitted to Sami, who is the one, Sami, who will be presenting later in this symposium. He has conducted a 2-day training on the interview measures, and finally the cases or the diagnosis, there were consensus diagnoses after being reviewed by Dr. Apter and Dr. Farbstein. We have obtained DNA from all study participants. So far we have around 450 subjects that are assessed in the study. And we have data on 333 whose data has been cleaned and they are being analyzed so far. So we have obtained their DNA, and the DNA were extracted in the laboratory of Ames Frisch at Tel Aviv University. And the extracted DNA is sent to the University of Pittsburgh for the candidate genes analysis. And later on, we will conduct the follow-up candidate genes after the linkage analysis at Dr. Robert Farrell's lab. And the genotyping, there are two approaches of genome-wide scans, either to use the short tandem repeats as STRs, the microsatellites, or the single nucleotide polymorphisms. And we have gone with the STRs because it is easier to manipulate, and the analytical tools for such a large inbred pedigree are more easier, and they are available with the STRs rather than the SNPs. So we have sent the data for genotyping to Prevention Genetics, and we have received the first batch of results that will be analyzed very soon. For the statistical methods, later in the symposium, Sami will present the clinical and demographic characteristics of the attempters in this study population. And once I get back to Pittsburgh, that's the first thing we're going to start analyzing the data, as we have received it a month earlier. And first we will review, or assess genotyping errors using PET-check. And the linkage analysis will be conducted using SymWalk and Solar, which are software that take into account inbreeding, and that are the software to use for this large inbred pedigree. And the power we have, because of the homogeneity of the study population as well as the high rates of consanguinity, that really adds to our power of detecting a certain gene, or really multiple genes that will account for these phenotypes. And we have more than 80% power to detect a gene that accounts for 5 to 10% of the population attributable risk. Thank you.